Long before that night at the Burger King, my life had been rearranged into smaller, quieter pieces. The divorce the previous winter had taken more than half my furniture and most of my certainty. The apartment felt cavernous, an echo chamber for the little things I used to take for granted. The way her coffee cup sat crooked in the sink, the laugh that filled the hallway when the dog tripped over a rug. I started making late-night runs to fast food joints because fluorescent light and the mechanical hum of soda fountains felt like company. It was stupid, I knew. But when the bed is too wide and the walls remember, you start finding comfort in places that don't ask anything of you. 2 weeks before the Durango followed me, there was the first scare. A fight had broken out in the drive-thru lane. 2 men shouting, a woman screaming, and one guy trying to yank open my passenger door while I fumbled for my wallet. I had the door locked, but the handle rattled like someone trying to break in. Trevor, no relation, just a guy who thought he could help, pulled up behind him and yelled something that made the men scatter. I left shaking and swore I'd never go back at night. 2 weeks later, I was back because habit is heavier than resolve. That night, the Burger King was almost empty. The cashier was scrolling through her phone with the bored attention of someone who had seen enough of late-night humanity to be unimpressed. The ice machine hummed like a generational lullaby. I ordered a grilled chicken sandwich, tried to pick a station of light where my thoughts wouldn't sneak up on me, and waited. Outside, through the glass, someone paced near the dumpsters. I told myself it was a homeless person keeping warm, same as the story I used as a talisman whenever fear wanted to get cute. I told myself a lot of things. When she approached, the light cut across her face like an interrogator. Red hoodie, lip skin cracked, eyes unfocused like she was reading from a cue card. She stepped up close enough that I could smell cigarette smoke and something metallic, maybe cheap perfume trying to be loud. "Hey," she said, "can you give me a ride? I just had a fight with my boyfriend. I need to get home." There was a mechanical quality to the words that made me freeze. She repeated it the same way, as if she were checking off lines on a script. I backed up a step. I'm not going anywhere right now," I said, voice thin. "Please," she said again. "Just a ride." The gray Durango in the far corner had engine off, headlights dark. Through the tinted windows, I could make out a silhouette hunched like someone waiting in a theater. The SUV didn't look like it belonged to a patron of late-night munchies. It had that too clean, too quiet look you get used to seeing in crime shows when the director wants you to squint. I told her no. I unlocked my car, palms slick around the keys, and slid in. She tried the handle. It came away taut and hungry for purchase. Her hand tugged like someone practicing. Then a light bloomed in the distance, the Durango's headlights. The woman stepped back, almost politely, and moved toward the passenger side like someone being dismissed. The light pinned me to my seat. I didn't think. My heart hammered, and the kind of animal logic fear gives you took over. Start the car. Get out. I reversed too fast, clipped a stray shopping cart, and almost did something worse. Hit the curb, jerked the wheel, left a scraping sound across the asphalt that might as well have been a scream. The Durango rolled forward, slow as a predator, and then followed. I took a couple of random turns through side streets, counted them under my breath like a barrier spell. 1, 2, 3. The SUV stayed the same distance off, not closing in, but not letting me breathe either. When I cut through a residential neighborhood and parked for a second behind a row of hedges, the Durango eased past and turned away. I called the police with a shaking hand, and they took my report with the official calm of people used to filing paperwork for other people's terror. "No crime occurred," the dispatcher said, "but we've had reports of help me setups. People call for help, someone offers a ride, and..." Her voice held the sentence like it was sticky. "It's a scam to rob or worse." I drove home slow and hollow. The city lights looked like holes punched in a map I no longer trusted. After that night, the world split into what I knew to be true and what my body remembered. I found myself scanning parking lots, checking mirrors twice, parking under lamps like some suburban lighthouse keeper. I used to joke about being hypervigilant. Now it felt like training I didn't volunteer for. Friends told me to stop letting it own me. They told me to file something more than a report. They told me to move. Practical things. The list of things people say when they mean well. I wrote them down and folded them into the drawer where other good advice went to die. The Durango never showed again. Sometimes I convinced myself the whole thing was a fluke. The sort of late-night theater you stage for yourself when your head's full of old memories and too much adrenaline. Other times I played the replay and heard the woman's voice, flat and persistent, like a line someone had told her to say. The more I thought about it, the more it fit a pattern. A rehearsed plea, a waiting silhouette, a vehicle that could slide in and take you where you weren't going to return. Time dulls things like this, but never erases them. Months later, I'd pull into a Burger King for ketchup and coffee, and my hands would creep to the lock before my brain even registered the headlights. My therapist, yes, I went, because even stubborn men can hear that their coping strategies are rusting, would ask what I felt when I flashed back. Helpless, I'd say, like someone rewound me to that first fight by the drive-thru when the door rattled. She nodded. "You survived it," she said. "You got out." Yeah, I thought. I did get out. But she was right in the way only someone outside a memory can be. Survival doesn't mean you aren't changed. Sometimes the lesson is only that you did the thing right once. Other times the lesson is that you learn to look for the bad parts before they arrive. It felt small, but it was something. Locks, headlights, a phone in my hand to dial for help. I started leaving bars a little earlier. I stopped answering doors at night. I kept my keys in my hand like a talisman. The red hoodie and the gray Durango became less a singular terror and more a shape, one of many tricks bad people use to catch strangers off guard. I began to see how small arrangements of movement and empathy can be weaponized. A plea for help is a powerful lever when someone is willing to pull it with the right timing. Sometimes at night, when the apartment goes quiet enough that the fridge's hum is a metronome, I can almost hear that voice. Soft, rehearsed, a little mechanical. "Can you give me a ride home?" It makes my palms sweat even now. But I also hear beneath that the memory of my own hand on the wheel and the bend of the road that led me away. Trust your instincts and take care of your boundaries. Small kindnesses can be real help, but it's okay to protect yourself when something feels rehearsed or off. Safety isn't selfish, it's survival. I always thought moving to Portland would feel like a reset you could taste. Rain on new pavement, a bus route that meant independence, a foster family that finally stayed. I was 17, tired of being shuffled, and hungry for normal. Photography felt like the closest thing to breathing, pointing a lens and capturing the world so the world couldn't hurt me back. To pay for supplies and classes, I worked evenings at Burger King. It was practical and quiet in the way a lot of temporary things are, necessary, crude, and easy to put down when it became too heavy. The first few nights were awkward but fine. Julian, a college kid who made jokes about everything, handled the drive-thru like it was the stage for his stand-up routine. He'd nudge me when I took too many photos of the food, or when I held my camera at weird angles in the break room. Mostly he made me laugh, and that was a miracle. But then I started seeing the yellow coat. At first, it was just a flash when I walked out for a smoke, a bright smear of fabric across the street under a bus stoplight. Then it was a silhouette leaning against a lamppost, the way someone leans when they want to belong somewhere. It didn't leave. I convinced myself it was coincidence. An older neighbor, a delivery driver, someone who liked the color yellow. After a week of catching that coat in storefront reflections and across the street from my bus stop, anything that also bore the name coincidence felt cheap. It felt wrong. I hadn't said any of that to Julian, not until the night the storm started. The wind pushed rain into the windows like someone trying to get in. The store smelled like fried potatoes and cleaning solution. I was on register, hands numb from the cold, when the bell announced a customer who had soaked everything but his eyes. He was thin and soaked through his yellow coat like a saffron flag gone ragged. He carried a doll, and when he turned it in his hand, I saw that its face matched mine in an absurd, impossible way. Mismatched eyes, the small scar on my lip I got falling off a curb at 10. The doll wore a tiny Burger King hat pinned crooked. Julian stumbled over his greeting. Dude, can I take your order?" The man ignored him. "Alina," he said, slow and soft, like he was reading from a page I hadn't written yet. "You moved here 3 months, 4 days, and 9 hours ago." My knees went soft. I'd watched the clock since I was a kid because punctuality was armor. The way he knew the exact hours felt like cold fingers. "You take the 14 bus," he continued. "You photograph old buildings and delete most of the pictures. Your bedroom light stays on until 4 in the morning." Before I could say anything, Julian called for a manager. Dave came out and tried to be loud and not afraid. The man lifted the doll. In its chest was a tear, and something red and wet pecked against fabric. "I made this for you. To keep safe," he whispered. The smell hit me like a memory. Raw meat, iron, and grease. I backed toward the soda machine. "Please don't come closer," I said, and then I did what I'd learned to do the hard way. Act small enough to not be a target. Julian shouted for the manager and for someone to call the cops. The man pulled a small knife and pressed it to his own throat, like he was drawing an X over himself. It was theater and threat in the same breath. The whole restaurant narrowed to his breathing and mine and the doll's stitched smile. The police came fast, probably because a storm was dramatic and because the night manager had a voice like a baritone who'd called 3 kinds of trouble before. The officers tackled him gently, like you would a hunted animal, and cuffed his hands. He didn't resist. He only blinked at me with a tenderness that made my skin crawl. "My name is Rowan," he said as he was led past the window. "You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm the only one who's ever really seen you." He was taken away, and later the police told us he was someone with paranoid schizophrenia, untreated. He'd been living across the street, they said, watching the bus stop and my route for nearly 5 weeks. Listening to them explain the clinical terms made it more real and in a cruel way, almost smaller. Symptom instead of threat. Still, numbers and labels don't erase the image of a man holding a doll with your face in its belly. We moved soon after. My foster parents wanted to change the address, change the routine, anything that could push the sharp edges down. I dyed my hair the safest color I could think of, took morning shifts so the nights wouldn't swallow me, and quit the photography classes that had become a map of places I might run into him. The decision felt like surrender and survival at once, but you don't move as your mind does. The storm's echo lived in my bones. I could smell rain on the bus, even on dry days. I would jump at the slightest scrape in the apartment building, expecting a hand or a shadow. The stitches of that doll haunted corners of my room that should have been empty. I started checking the windows in the morning and the locks twice at night. The foster parents listened and made calls and tried to teach me breathing exercises. That helped some nights, but not the ones when a yellow smear appeared behind parked cars, and my breath turned hard and sharp like iced wire. I tried to make jokes about it with Julian when I ran into him at the grocery store near work. He smiled and told me I was being dramatic. He never saw the coat across the street, never found a doll on his porch, never had to wake with his heart punching his ribs because of thumbnails of photos he'd taken in the dark. Months passed, and I learned the practical things. File police reports, keep receipts, save screenshots of any weird messages. I learned that paranoia and caution look similar, and that people make room for one and not the other. I learned to tell myself the truth, that I was allowed to be afraid, and still allowed to be alive. Then one morning I found a tiny doll on our porch. New clothes, a tiny uniform pin, the face that matched mine like a question and a condemnation. The nails dug into the wood beneath it, like somebody had pressed it there with intention. I didn't scream this time. I didn't let it be a scene. I took the doll inside and sat on the kitchen floor with it in my lap and tried to measure how much of me I would give to fear if I let it. Fear wants to be the only story you tell. If you hand it the pen, it will write the rest of your life in capital letters. Instead, I wrapped the doll in kitchen towels, placed it in a box, and called Julian. He came over, eyes wide and steady. We took the box to the local precinct that had seen Rowan before. It felt ridiculous and necessary both to hand over the evidence, to let someone else hold the weight for a while. The officers were careful and kind in a way that surprised me. They took statements and fingerprints and gave me a number to call if I ever saw anything else. They also set up a check-in plan. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about being watched ever felt perfect again. But it was a system, and systems are better than silence. I went back to photography eventually. Not the classes I'd paid for, but small things. A crooked stoop, a cracked window with light pooling like a bruise. I learned to take pictures that were honest, not defensive. I learned that being afraid is not wrong. Letting fear finish your sentence is. Trauma changes the map of your life, but surrendering to fear gives it territory it doesn't deserve. Safety is not a single act, but a collection of small, stubborn decisions. To move, to speak up, to call for help, to reclaim what you love. You don't have to be unafraid to survive. You only have to keep taking the next right step. Long before that night in the freezer, I never thought of myself as someone who scared easily. I grew up around construction sites with my dad, spent summers crawling under decks or carrying lumber twice my weight. But everybody has one weakness, and mine was tight, locked spaces. When I was 10, my mom and I got stuck in a mall elevator for nearly 4 hours. No lights, no air, nothing but the sound of metal creaking and the feeling of walls closing in. Ever since then, anything with a latch made my chest tighten. Walk-in freezers, storage lockers, even some public bathrooms. I avoided them when I could, and tolerated them only when I absolutely had to. The Burger King I worked at didn't help. The place had a reputation, especially among night shift employees. People said the storage hallway creaked when no one was in it, and sometimes boxes in the dry pantry moved from one shelf to another overnight. I always laughed it off, called it draft wind or rats or Sean forgetting where things went. But the walk-in freezer? That thing made my heartbeat drum in my ears every time I stepped inside. I had been working at that Burger King for almost a year, mostly scraping together enough cash for textbooks and rent. College wasn't cheap, and I wasn't one of those lucky kids who could float on a trust fund. My schedule was full-time classes by day, greasy aprons by night. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. That winter, the snowstorms had come down harder than usual. Streets were buried, traffic lights flickered in the wind, and even the regulars who normally camped out in the lobby with coffee disappeared. On the night everything happened, only 2 of us showed up for the closing shift, me and Sean, the assistant manager. Sean was the kind of guy who always looked exhausted, always smelled faintly like whiskey, and never seemed bothered by anything. Not broken fryers, not angry customers, not the blizzard beating against the glass. "You good for stocking the freezer?" he asked as soon as I clocked in. "District might do a surprise inspection tomorrow." I groaned. "Dude, the latch has been sticking all week." Sean waved me off. "Just don't slam it, kid. You'll be fine." The words, "you'll be fine," never made me feel less fine. An hour into the shift, drive-thru slowed to a crawl. Most sane people were home avoiding the storm, and the few who did come through were truck drivers or night shift workers grabbing hot food before the roads got worse. The wind outside sounded like a freight train trying to rip the building apart. Sean leaned against the fryer, scrolling his phone. "Get that freezer done before we get another rush." "I'm telling you," I muttered, grabbing the flashlight we kept for nights like this. "If I get stuck in there, you're paying for my therapy." Yeah, he said without looking up. "Just don't lock it." I wished it were that simple. I pushed open the heavy door. The familiar blast of icy air hit my face, sharp enough to sting. Frost coated the shelves like someone had dusted everything with powdered snow. The light overhead flickered, the same annoying strobe effect it had been doing for months. I stepped in deeper, counting breaths to keep my nerves steady. 1, 2, 3. The cold felt heavier than usual, almost like the air carried weight. My fingers tightened around the flashlight as I made my way toward the back where the patties were stacked. Then the light caught something. A pair of shoes. Not Burger King shoes. Not Sean's boots. These were old, torn, soaked shoes. Blackened from salt and slush, laces knotted into frayed ends. They stuck out from behind a stack of frozen chicken boxes. I froze. "Sean?" I called out, voice cracking. No answer. I stepped closer. The shoes twitched. My breath fogged the air. "Hello? Are you okay?" The figure behind the boxes shifted, a low groan slipping out like someone waking from a nightmare. My entire spine prickled. The flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered onto the steel floor, the beam spinning wildly before dying. Now the only light came from the flickering bulb overhead. "Sean!" I yelled, backing away so fast I hit a shelf. "Sean, someone's in here!" No answer. The figure rose slowly, painfully, like every joint was frozen stiff. A dragging step scraped across the floor. Another. The bulb flickered harder, casting shadows that stretched and snapped. I stumbled toward the door. That familiar sound, the one from my nightmares, followed next. The metallic click of the latch sticking. No, come on! I slammed my shoulder into the door. The handle barely budged. I yanked it until my hands burned. Behind me, the footsteps grew louder, slow, uneven, not threatening at first, more like desperate. A cold whisper echoed off the freezer walls, some slurred word I couldn't understand. The bulb flickered again, bright enough for one horrifying second. A man stood 10 feet away, pale as paper, his beard crusted with frost. His eyes were wide, glassy, unfocused, as if he wasn't fully conscious. His lips were blue, trembling. He reached a hand out toward me, the fingers stiff and shaking. My lungs locked. The man whispered again, raspy, broken, something that sounded pleading but not entirely human. I didn't wait to decipher it. I pounded on the door so hard my knuckles split. "Sean, open the door! Open it now!" The latch finally snapped, and the door jerked open. Light from the kitchen spilled inside, and I fell forward onto the tile, gasping like someone who had been underwater too long. Sean stood there, face pale, cursing under his breath. "What the hell was that?" he snapped. I pointed, shaking too hard to speak. Behind me, the man collapsed onto the freezer floor, half conscious, his body shaking violently. Sean's eyes widened. "Holy! Call 911!" The next 10 minutes blurred. EMTs burst through the back door. Police followed. I sat on a crate near the sink, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed me. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. A paramedic checked my vitals, asking simple questions I had trouble answering. The officers lifted the man from the freezer, his skin mottled with frostbite. He didn't look dangerous. He looked lost, like he had wandered off some icy road and stumbled into the wrong shelter. One officer approached me. "Son, did you talk to him? Did he say anything?" He said something," I whispered. "I don't know what. He sounded scared." They told me he'd been reported missing 2 nights earlier, after a blizzard shut down part of the highway. They figured he'd sought shelter anywhere he could find, maybe through the unlocked back door the closing crew forgot to secure. But there was one thing everyone kept questioning. "How the hell did he get behind those boxes?" the lead investigator muttered. "They weigh 40 pounds each. Takes 2 people to move them." Sean swore he never heard anyone enter the building. I still don't know how the man got that deep inside. Months passed. The store got a new latch installed, a new security camera, and a lecture from corporate. My coworkers treated me differently for a while, like I'd survived something supernatural even though the truth was more ordinary. A desperate man, a cold night, a building that wasn't as locked as it should have been. But fear doesn't care about logic. Every time I walked down the storage hallway after that, the fluorescent lights hissed just a little too loud. Every time I passed the freezer, my throat tightened. Sometimes during late shifts, I swore I heard dragging footsteps behind me even when I knew the store was empty. One night, a month after the incident, I caught myself standing outside the freezer door, staring, unable to step inside for a simple soda refill. My hands shook uncontrollably. Sean noticed and clapped my shoulder. "You're okay, kid," he said quietly. "Lighting was bad, the latch was busted, and you were tired. That's all." But we both knew he didn't fully believe it either. I eventually switched to daytime shifts. Less chance of storms, less chance of locked doors, less chance of someone hiding where they shouldn't be. I still think about the man sometimes, not as a monster, as someone who was inches away from dying alone in the cold, in a place where no one ever looks. Pay attention to the small things. Unlocked doors, broken latches, the quiet corners no one checks. Neglect is often what lets danger slip in, and being aware can save a life, including your own.